But I do want to introduce our guest. I had the great pleasure of listening and meeting Dr. Copps back in 2023 when IONS had its national conference in the Washington, D.C. area. He was a speaker at that. And I quickly made the most of the opportunity as soon as I heard him speak to go up to him and welcome him to come and speak to our group because he was very impressive. And so it's a great pleasure, even though it's many, many months later, to actually have him joining us live today. Now, Dr. Copps, Bob, is a scientist, a retired financier who has studied the near-death experience for a very long time. He does a lot of lecturing in Europe and in the US, and he's written a couple of books related to the subject. His latest book is called Impressions of Near-Death Experiences, which really is a compilation of a lot of quotes from experiences, sharing what they've gone through. And it's a very good book, so I definitely encourage you to get it. He's going to be discussing the near-death experience today from a number of different perspectives, including exiting the body, unconditional love, the fact that we're all one. He's going to discuss life reviews, distressing NDEs, which is a very interesting topic, why we're on Earth, why everybody is important, and getting back into the body is, principal aspect of the fact that we're all one and love binds us all. And he's also going to be talking about veridical observations, which is my favorite topic because I love to see the evidence that's coming in, because that really helps a lot of people make the transition into believing that it is real and it's not just hypoxia of the brain and lack of oxygen that's creating a hallucination. This is actually a very real phenomenon. So I'm very interested to tune into his version of the veridical evidence that's available. So without further ado, let's give a warm welcome to Bob Copps, Dr. Copps, who's joining us again from the Netherlands today. Welcome, Bob. Lovely to have you here.
Well, it's wonderful to be here with you, and I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to be in your podcast or at your meeting for IONS in around Washington, where I've been for the conference. I'm really grateful for this opportunity, and indeed, I will be talking about my what is in my book, Impressions of Near-Death Experiences. That has hundreds of quotes of NDEers. I spoke to a lot of them, and I took a lot of quotes from open sources. And there are more than 100 NDEers in my book, and I always call them the best tutors in life, because they can give you good pointers for your life. It's really, I found it very important to have come across a lot of them. It is a publication by IONS, and there are famous NDEers in my book, like Anita Moorjani or even Alexander. People know these people. But also non-famous ones, like, I'll come to those. Maybe some of them because they are in IONS, they work there, they do things there, and sometimes you won't know them. And these quotes, all these quotes together, give you a good impression of what an NDE is. I always liken it to, if you come to the place where I live in Amsterdam and you are here on the Dam Square, and I show you the palace on the Dam Square, and I tell you to look at it and then close your eyes after half a minute, then I can ask you, what have you seen? You will give only a little information there. You can't have seen everything of the palace. You haven't seen the backside. You haven't seen the top or the sides or the interior. That is why I find it so important to have more points of view. And that's also with what I try to do in my book. I wanted to give more points of view to people reading it so they can come to their own conclusion about what NDEs are. So I don't tell them what they are. I just leave it up to the reader to come to their own conclusion. But if you'd ask me what my conclusion is, then I would say love and oneness. That would be also the title. If I could give a title to this presentation, is Love and Oneness, because love is the most important thing that comes out of NDEs. And also there's a oneness, and I'll come to that later, but it gives the impression that I am you and you are me. There's no difference. And it seems like there is a oneness and love binds us all. Now, may I just say something about myself? I'm living in Amsterdam. I told that. Angie already said that I studied NDEs for quite a while. That's true. I wrote several books on NDEs, and currently I'm board member of IONS. That's the only thing that I wanted to say about myself. And now I'll come to what I'm going to do in this time that I can spend with you, and I'm grateful to be there with you. There are 12 chapters in my book, and there are so many quotes. And I just wanted to give you a number of them. I'll throw a number at you. I know that's a lot. You don't have to remember them all. Just let them sink in and see what resonates with you, which quotes resonate with you, and then take them back home. That is how it works. And before I start, I want to give some sort of disclaimers, maybe, if you want to call it like that, because when you talk about NDEs, you need to keep a few things in mind. One of those things would be that an NDE is an overwhelming experience for the one who has it. It's a life changer. People change thoroughly, and that is something that is overlooked by medics that assist people after their NDE oftentimes. The term near-death experience, I find it not covering the real thing, but it's difficult to find a term that does. But a near-death experience gives the impression that you can have that when you are close to death, when you're near to death. But by now, after so many years, after this term was coined by Raymond Moody in 1975, we know that these experiences also occur in different circumstances. Like, well, most often they would occur in a medical critical situation when, for instance, someone has a cardiac arrest or an accident. But not always. We know that there are a lot of people who've had such an experience in a psychological downturn in their life. And I'm not talking about just a downturn, but the real psychological problem that overturns their whole life. And then a lot of those people have an NDE. Sometimes it's even that people have it when they have very thorough prayers, or they meditate very deeply. And occasionally we come across NDEs that occur just spontaneously. It's strange to hear that, but it's true. There are a few cases, and they are also in my book. Having said, no, so that's the term is wrong. There is no standard NDE. So it's not a tick box exercise. There you can say, well, I went out of my body, tick. There is a tunnel, a tick. I see the light at the end of the tunnel. I have a life review, etc. It doesn't work like that. Not one NDE is the same as another, which is interesting, but it's also difficult for researchers to do research. They are also, that's another thing that's difficult, they are ineffable. It's difficult for NDEers to say, to tell what they have experienced, because there are no terms, there are no words, there are no concepts in our world that would cover some of the aspects that they find there. So how can you bring into English or any other language the things that you have experienced? It's difficult. So that is another reason why it's difficult to research these experiences, because there's more to it than only what people tell. It's a lot more than that. And the last thing is that there's too much to take back home, back to earth, back to the body of the experiencer. So they see much more, they feel much more, they know much more, but when they go back to their body, they have to leave that behind. So those are things that I want to say beforehand, that gives you insight in that what we know is just perhaps a fraction of the reality that is out there. Now, having said all that, now I'm going to finally start with some of the things that I wanted to bring forward. The first thing is out of body. How do you get out of your body? One of the quotes that I really love, and that's in my book, it's a woman who says, "It's so easy to leave your body. It's like a toast popping out of a toaster. You're just out of your body instantaneously. It's no effort. It's nothing complicated. It just happens like that." Then I'd like to tell the story about Ellen Dye. Maybe you know her. She lives quite close to where you are in Washington. She lives in Virginia Beach. She had her NDE as a consequence of a car crash. She was driving in a road, and there was an oncomer, and that person suddenly decided to turn off the road and did that just where she was. So there was a collision, a big bang, a collision. Next thing she knows is she is hovering outside the car, above the scene, looking down at the scene. And then it starts. She thinks, wow, I'm hovering here and my body is down there. That's possible? That is something that typically happens to NDEs. They are flabbergasted about what they see. They don't understand that. So what happens then is that she thinks, I'm thinking up here, so the real me is here. Whereas I can see through the roof of my car that my body is lying there. But the real thing is here, up here. And then something else happens. The guy from the other car, from the other side of the road, goes out of the car, exits the car, walks over to her side, turns off the lights, so as to give the impression that Ellen Dye was driving without her headlights and that he couldn't see her. And that went to court, but she maintained her story and she was acquitted, fortunately, because the other side didn't show up. That's just the end of the story. Then there is a story about a woman who had her NDE in hospital because of inflammation in her lungs. Suddenly she is outside her body. Oftentimes people hover just below the ceiling looking down, and she thinks, she doesn't think much about it. The only thing that she sees is a woman lying in bed wearing the same gown as she is. And she thinks, wow, this person has the same nightgown that I have. And then only later, just a fraction or two later, she understands that it's herself. Then she hears her husband talk, and her husband is in the corridor of the hospital in a telephone booth. You know, these things that we had in previous times where you had to go in, there's a phone hanging, you have to talk into the thing, etc. Her husband was standing there talking to a friend in another state in the United States. But she hears him talk and instantaneously is with him in the telephone booth. When the friend in the other state replies, she is in the other state together with this other person. And when the husband says something, she's back again, so she can see both places at the same time. So that is something that is interesting. Stories like that happen a lot. Another example is Elizabeth Krohn, who had her NDE as a consequence of a lightning strike. She went to the synagogue in the place where she lived. There was a sudden thundercloud overhead. She didn't see it before. It was there. And she decided to get out of the car together with her two children. And they ran to the synagogue. She was grabbing her umbrella. She actually was holding onto one of her children. And then she heard a big thunder and a big flash at the same time. And then she said, I felt a sizzling going through me. And I didn't think much about it because everything seemed okay. So, but her child that was near to her screamed and ran away, ran to the door, and she just went after him slowly. And then when she came into the synagogue, there was a big consternation. Everyone was looking outside and trying to console the two children. And then she turned outside to see what they were looking at. And then she sees her own body lying there on the ground with a blackened umbrella. And it shows you that people don't really understand the first moment. It goes so easily that you exit your body. And of course, then she has her NDE. Another story is about Nancy Rhines. She's also quite well known in the ions. It shows you that you can have two vantage points sometimes. That is what is said many times as well. So she had her NDE as a consequence of a collision with a car. She was riding her bicycle and enjoying herself, and there was a roundabout, and the car, an SUV, didn't give her the right of way. So she was suddenly under the car. And the car didn't stop there. So she was pulled alongside the road, on the road, and she was having suddenly two points of view. She was lying under the truck, looking up and seeing the grill of the car. And then at the same time, she was hovering over the scene a few maybe 100 yards or 30 yards above the scene, looking down on the scene. And the interesting thing was that the viewpoint of herself under the truck was in anxiety, there was stress, there was a fighting for life, there was anger, there was fear. And the other point of view was total neutrality. There was no emotion whatsoever. It was just looking onto the scene, what was happening there. But it was her. So she had two points of view where she could see the whole scene. That is out of body. How do you get out of your body? Later I'll tell you something about how you get into your body. There are some funny stories there to tell. But near-death experiences. In my talks, I always say they are no fairy tales. They sound like fairy tales because there is this talk about this wonderful world out there. But how do you prove that? How do you make sure that it's not just a fairy tale that people have, or that it is something that has to do with some lack of oxygen at the end of your life, or when you're starting to die, lack of oxygen in your brain that gives you hallucinations, or maybe some stuff that is produced in your brains because of it's a dying brain. There's some research about that. In the Netherlands, there is research done. It's prospective research. It was published in the Lancet, and that's a medical journal that's very important. It shows it was a study that was conducted in the Netherlands in about 13 hospitals during a time span of 10 years, and they every time a cardiac arrest patient was brought into the hospital, they would ask later after the resuscitation was successful, because otherwise you can't talk to these people. So in a successful resuscitation, they would ask just one thing: do you have a recollection of what happened when you were out? Now, of the 344 patients, there were like 62 having a memory, and those were the NDEs. Now, it's interesting. Then you have two groups, one group with an NDE, one group without an NDE, and you can compare them. If there is a difference, then maybe that can cause an NDE. Well, you can guess what happened. Both groups had a lack of oxygen. Both groups were having a dying brain. So both groups, it doesn't. It's not statistically significant that there is a difference between these two. So you cannot say that it's a lack of oxygen or that there is a dying brain that produces all these, whatever it is, to induce these kind of experiences. So, but it's still unclear what does cause an NDE. Now we have some kind of other proof that I find very important, and that is veridical observations. Veridical observations. Those are verifiable out-of-body experiences. Now, to explain it a little bit more, and I'll give you some examples. Someone who has had an NDE exits the body, so you have an out-of-body experience. During that time, sometimes people can just wander around where their body is. Sometimes they go through a hospital and they see things, and they come back later after their NDE, and they say then, they can tell then what they've seen. And then if it's confirmed independently later on, then that is important proof. Now, in my opinion, there are two such kind of experiences. And I'll give you examples, just bear with me. Two of those kind of experiences. So there are veridical observations where the NDEer observes the material world. But there are also that those kind of experiences give you circumstantial evidence that people can get out of their body and still have their consciousness there. That's important. But it still doesn't give some circumstantial evidence that there is this heavenly environment. Now, the second kind of veridical observations do have information that they get in this heavenly realm, and they can take back home to their body later on, and they can prove that it's correct information. And I'll give you a few examples. First, one of a situation where there is a veridical observation of the material world. It's an example that was in a book in the Netherlands that was written after this important research of which I told you just before, and that was published in the Lancet, a medical journal. This is a case of a man that was found in a Dutch meadow, and he had a cardiac arrest. In his case, he had no respiration. His features were gray already. There was no breathing, and there was post-mortem lividity also. He was taken into an ambulance, and the nurses in the ambulance tried to intube him to get him oxygen. That didn't work very well. So in the hospital, they were doing continued doing the resuscitation. And there was this one nurse that tried to intube the guy again and found out that the guy had false dentures, false teeth. So he took them out, and then he was successful in tubing him. And I must say the resuscitation took a long time, really a long time, and they almost gave up. But finally, he made it. But the thing is that this nurse, he put the dentures in a crash cart, and it's some time ago, and we didn't have crash carts as they have now in hospitals, in operating rooms. This one was made from a kitchen cart. It was modified, and it was used in these kind of circumstances. So this nurse put the dentures in this cart. The patient is unconscious. The nurse goes on a holiday, and the patient recovers. And then later, the nurse comes back from holidays and goes do his rounds and goes to this room where this patient lies. And this patient suddenly said to him, "You are the guy you are the nurse who was there when there was my resuscitation, and you were working there. You took my dentures out and you put it in this cart that I saw, and no one can find it. So you know where it is. Just go find it." And this nurse goes out and tries to find back this cart and finds the dentures there. This is a case where you can see clearly that something happens in the material world, like putting the dentures in a crash cart, and then where later it is confirmed that this person had seen it, the NDE had seen it, and couldn't have seen it because he was unconscious. Then an example of a veridical observation in the heavenly environment. I take this from a case. It's a case from Raymond Moody himself. There is a Fiona, Fiola. That's the person's name. She had to undergo a operation on her gallbladder. That went successful, but after the operation, she was recovering, and then suddenly she had a cardiac arrest. They tried to resuscitate her, which eventually went right, but she had her NDE. Now, in her NDE, first she starts wandering, I should say, through the hospital, and she sees her relatives and friends that came to the hospital because they got notice that she is in a very bad situation and could die any moment. She sees these people she sees what they are wearing, and she also overhears some of the conversations. And then later, she can say exactly what they had been talking about and what they were wearing. So that's the veridical observation from the first category. The second category comes now because then she has her heavenly experience. She goes through the tunnel. Not everyone, by the way, goes through a tunnel. I told you that not every NDE is the same as another. She meets spiritual beings, and one of them presents himself as a baby, and that's strange for her, but everything is strange for her there. But she sees this person coming towards her and shows himself as a baby and tells her, "Remember how I look like. Remember the clothes that I'm wearing, and tell that to your father." And what happens is that later, when she is resuscitated and after her recovery, she speaks with the father, and the father said, "Yes, I had a child, a son, before you, never spoke about him, but it's true. So she had seen this person without knowing that he was there. Now something else happens. She also gets this information about future. So she had some previews of what was going to happen in her life. And one of the things was that she was shown a picture and clearly the name of Raymond Moody. And she was told to remember that name and that the image, the picture of him, how he looks like. Because later on in her life, she would see him and she doesn't have to do anything to get acquainted with him. It will go as it goes. It's just easy. You don't have to do anything in order to get into his attention. It will happen. If it happens, have a conversation with him and tell him about your experience. And I have to say at this point that that was when Raymond Moody hadn't published his first book, Life After Life, where he coined the term near-death experience. So he wasn't famous. So this was just a name that she was given. But then she lives in this little village, a very tiny village. And 18 months after her cardiac arrest, Raymond Moody moves to this little city, this little town, a village, a very small. And then they didn't get to know each other because she lived on one end and he lived on the other end. And then a few years later, there was a Halloween thing with trick or treat. And Raymond Moody's son and mother went along the doors to do the trick or treat. And then they wind up at her doorstep, at the NDEs doorstep. And then she looks at the child and she thinks, well, I know every child in this town and this one I don't know. So she asks his name. What is your name? And then he says, the little child, he says, my name is Raymond Avery Moody III. And then instantaneously, the NDEer gets again this picture and a voice in her head says, now. And then she looks up to the mother and she says, I need to speak to your husband. Now, this gives you the idea that someone gets information in the afterlife or in this heavenly environment, and then on earth later, it turns out to be absolutely correct. Maybe I can give you another example, but I'm looking at the time as well, so I think I'll skip that one. Maybe if you ask about it, it's about my own experience somewhere with financial crisis. That was quite interesting. The next chapter is about out of this world. So out of this world, it's such a strange environment. It has a very interesting features. And again, it's difficult to talk about them for an NDEer because there are no concepts enough. There are no words to convey what they have what they have experienced there. But let me tell you that people say what they have experienced there is more real than the life we have here. Some people say it's there is real. Here it's just an image. It's just part of what is there. There's much more there. It's more than three-dimensional, some people say. And some people, or most people say, you are so free. There's such a freedom, such a liberty, and you feel more alive than ever. One of my friends in Amsterdam, she is also NDEer, and she gives courses in mediumship, and I do that course as well. It's very interesting. And she said, you know, it's difficult to explain what is out there. It's difficult. It's absolutely impossible. She said she likened it to having to play Beethoven, you know, the composer, play that Beethoven music on a bucket. You turn around a bucket and you start playing and try to image Beethoven's music. Or the other one was, Rembrandt, that I can't remember that one. Rembrandt is one of the main Dutch painters. And she said, just consider yourself seeing the painting, Rembrandt, that's the reality. And then you have to do the same thing over on the paving stones outside your house with 2 colors of chalk. Impossible. So you can't really convey what is out there. Time and place are also strange. Like if you hear NDEs talk about time, it's always that it's not there or that it's all at the same time. That's actually one of the quotes in my book. Time is there all at the same time. One person said it was eternity unfolding. And another person said, my experience was not in time, it was between time. So I don't know what that means, but there's something strange going on with time. So there's no time, or it is there all at the same time. And place is no problem either. I'll tell you 2 stories about that. Anita Marjani's story is that she was dying in a hospital in Hong Kong, and all her family was present there. Then suddenly, except for her brother was not there. She dies, she gets out of her body, and then she sees everyone sitting there in the room where she just passed away, and she misses her brother. She thinks, my brother is not there. And the next moment she is in the plane with her brother, because the brother is trying to get there in time to see her just before she dies, but doesn't make it. And she is there in the plane. This other example is from an Iranian guy, someone from Iran, who had an accident in the middle of the desert. And he's taken to the hospital. And in the hospital, they perform the operation on him to get him back and resuscitate him. And then he has his NDE. He also tells how he hovers through concrete walls and says it's so easy. But that's aside. But he thinks of his mother. So he sees the operation going on. He sees the doctors. He sees and understands what the nurse is thinking at that moment. And he thinks about his mother, and his mother was living in a place 100 kilometers away from there. But he was in the house of his mother, seeing how she was preparing a meal, not knowing what happened to her son. And then he was thinking about friends, and he was in the house of the friends and saw what they were doing. At the same time, he was in the house of the mother. At the same time, he was also in the operating room where they were working on his body. So place is something that is no limitation at all. So place and time are no issues over there. All knowledge is freely available. That is also something that people say. It's very interesting how that works. And then to finish this part on Out of This World, I want to give you this example of Ellen Dye again. I told you about the car crash she had, but after the car crash, she was went through this tunnel and she came into this dark void. So the dark void is something that other people talk about as well, not everyone again. But some people talk about the dark void. They hang there. They just float in it. There's nothing there. It's totally dark. But for her, she said it felt so nice. It felt smooth. It felt loving. There was a lot of happiness for me. There was a lot of love for me. And she just enjoyed that tremendously. But after a while, she said, you know, it's nice, but I'd like to see something. I'd like to have a view of something. And then suddenly something happens. And I'll read to you what she says, what she wrote in her on her website. She says, as soon as I had that thought, everything shimmered and shifted. And I found myself looking over a park-like landscape. It was as if a giant hand with many paintbrushes moved across the canvas, painting the scene with the greenest grass that I have ever seen. The largest and most beautiful and most alive flowers and trees and rolling hills with pathways and blue skies and birds overhead. And it continues like that. She smelled roses and sunshine and freshness. And it was wonderful. But she wanted to see something else. And there it was. They gave it to her. Then I come to one thing that I will skip very quickly because it's something that you can find in any NDE, and that is love. And love is the most important thing there is. In my opinion, love is the most important thing, and the next one is the oneness that I will talk about later. Just a few quotes. Unconditional love, but even that term is inadequate to convey the real thing. And then this quote, I learned that what people think of as God is the energy of love, which binds the universe together, all life, all physics. The energy of love is the essence of life. And then the light, I'll just give you one quote there. That's a wonderful quote because this person said the light is everywhere. It's everywhere. It is in you, in me, in the chairs, in the animals, in the trees, everywhere. And he says he likened it to the air pressure. You know, we are sitting here and you don't notice it, but there is an air pressure upon your shoulders. And I know that in the US, it's like 15 pounds per square inch. In Europe, it would be 1 kilo per square centimeter, but it doesn't matter. It's just metrics. But there is an air pressure that presses upon your shoulders, but you don't notice it. The same way there is this light. The light is everywhere. It's in plain sight, but we don't see it. We fail to see this whole thing. And then I come to the life review. The life review is really very important, in my opinion. It's something that gives people also this feeling of being overwhelmed, because a life review is something that occurs where you feel what you did to others as if you are that other person. You are that other person. And I'll give you an example of Daniel Brinkley. Daniel Brinkley is a guy who had his NDE as a consequence of a lightning strike through a telephone line. And then he sees his life again, and he notices how it was. And he said of himself that he was an awful guy. I just tell you what is in his book. He wrote together with Paul Perry. And he said, I was really awful because I was in countless fights as a child. I stole people's bikes. And then later, he went working for an American government organization. And he had to go to other countries and kill off adversaries of the US government. And he said, I killed a lot of people. And what he saw in his NDE was the lives of these people that he killed. But not only the lives of those people that he killed, but also of the wives that they left behind and the children that were without their father now. And he felt what it was to be such a child, So that went very far. And he said that was awful. That was very difficult to go through. There are also stories of life reviews where people see what they do to animals. He had an example as well where he was driving through the countryside with his uncle, and he saw a goat that was stuck in the fence and a farmer that was whipping the goat. And he pulls the car to a stop and then goes over to this farmer and just hits him. He was very explosive at the moment. He's a very explosive person. So that's what he did. But in his life review, he felt what the goat felt, like this moment of that nothing happened, and that the goat could finally try to escape, and which the goat did. So it's you don't only feel what you do to other people, but also animals. There's another example in my book as well. And the interesting thing is, no one judges you. That's the thing that really made me start with researching NDEs. Let me give you an example there. There is this Boy Scout who almost drowned. And in his NDE, he has his life review. He overviews his life, and then they're in the presence of what he says is an angel. And he then, when it's over, he asks the angel, "I hope I won't be judged too severely." And then the angel said, "You will be judged by the most powerful judge there is." And then the Boy Scout says, "Oh, and when will that happen?" And then the angel answers, "It already happened. The judge, that is you." Just to show you, there's no one judging you. If there is anyone judging you, it's yourself. Then the chapter on that everyone is important. I really understand that everyone has a purpose. No one would be here if you wouldn't have a purpose. There is a purpose for everyone's life. We are all very important. We also have a free will, it seems. So we can decide. It's not like things are fixed. We can still decide for ourselves. And then just to show you that gay people are also okay, it's that this person had his life review, and in his life review, everything was okay. He sees his life review for the first time. Then everything seems to be okay. But he sees his life review for the second time. And then he understands that it's that he was concerned that being gay was something that would not be accepted. So the second time he saw his life review, he saw that there was a lot of self-doubt about being gay. Then he was wondering, would he be worth to God as a gay man? And then he asked bluntly, "Is it okay to be gay?" And then the other side, or the light, was laughing, a very nice laugh, not a mocking laugh, but a very nice laugh. And they both laughed. And he said, "We laughed such a long time." And the light said, "Who do you think made gay people?" So that is to show you that we are all important, no matter what constitution you are. Distressing NDEs. Let me see what I'm doing with the time. Yeah, distressing NDEs is something that is a difficult topic, but I'd like to say something about it anyway. Distressing NDEs is a minority, but they exist. And they have been researched by Nancy Evans Bush, for instance. Maybe some people know her very well. She has written a few books about it. The conclusion that she comes up with, and I adhere to that conclusion, is that you cannot say that distressing NDEs are only there for bad people and that blissful NDEs are only there for good people. We have not enough information about distressing NDEs, but this we know for sure. I'll give you an example, like Daniel Brinkley. I spoke about him just before. He had his NDE. He saw his life review. His life review was horrible because of the things that he did. There was no judgment, but he had a wonderful NDE. There was a lot of love for him as well. Nothing, no anger, no judgment, nothing. So this shows you that a person that has been going around killing and teasing and bullying people can have a blissful NDE. Now there is this other book. Let me show you first my book, that's Impressions of Near-Death Experiences. In that book, you will have this story about Kathy McDaniel, Misfit in Hell to Have an Expat. And that is a story of a woman who is just kind of, a normal person. No one who had done something like Daniel Brinkley did, yet she found herself in hell. She exits hell through a very interesting way, and I'll leave it up to you to read that in my book. But it shows you that normal people, and there are more stories of this about just commoners, common people, normal people who have had a distressful NDE, and we cannot say why that is. It's nothing that they have been bad and good like we all have been bad and good. And there are so many blissful NDEs, they have been just as bad or good as the people who have had a blissful NDE. So the idea is that there must be another explanation for this. And the other explanation would be something like, and that's what Nancy Evans Bush comes up with. And I think she's right. And there are indications that it's right because of the stories that we have. And the idea is that in the first phase of your NDE, things that come up from our collective unconscious or from your own unconscious, what you've experienced before in your life, pop up and give you this hellish kind of experience. The distressing NDEs, they come in grades. Some of them are where people have the same things as another, like going through a tunnel very fast and finding that distressing already, or people that feel that the life review is distressing. But there are also people that have real hellish kind of experiences. And in the case of Kathy McDaniel, to take her as an example, there have been instances or experiences in her life before, like being raped, having fear of AIDS, and many of those things that popped up in her NDE and scared the hell out of her. So those things come up from her own consciousness, and that probably caused, I have to be careful as a researcher, probably caused the distressing part of her NDE. I also want to leave the listener with a positive note on this, because there are also NDEers that have heard explicitly told them, they have been hearing that during their NDE, that there are, one of them said, I heard that really there is no hell or purgatory. So there is no hell or purgatory. And another one heard or said, I was shown there is no hell. We all go home. And home is the place that so many NDEs talk about. And then a third one said, everyone gets there eventually. So there's no, people shouldn't have fear about this. There's another reason why I think there is no such thing as a hell, because there is this concept of unity. So many NDEers have found or have experienced a kind of unity in their NDE. So if there is only one, if there's only unity, why would some part or some people be left outside of that unity? So that isn't logical. And now I come to this thing about we are one. So this unity part. There is a Dutch person who had her NDE, and she had a wonderful a quote: "Everything I do has influence on everything. Nothing is lost. It's a kind of law of conservation of energy. That is why we should not do to others what we don't want for ourselves. Moreover, what we send, we will attract. And we should also be mindful of our thoughts, because we create with our thoughts." So what she says is that it's only one. There's it's kind of conservation of energy, the law of conservation of energy. Then there is this story that I always mention, and I love that very much. There's a woman who had her NDE. In her NDE, she sees everything, she understands everything, and she thinks to herself, how come we don't see that when we are on Earth? What makes it that we can't see that there is this thing there, that it's so easy to understand? But then she's told she has to go back, and she wants to go back because she has a child to look after. And she goes back with the thought of one line. She says, I wanted to hold on to that one line because I knew that it would say everything. And then the one line is, all is everything, and everything is one. All is everything, and everything is one. We still don't understand what it means, but there's oneness. A Dutch woman, I'll give you her quote. She died now in real, but she had her NDE before, and I spoke to her, and she said, it's also in her book, which is only in Dutch, I feel completely perfect, completely one with the light and the love. And I know that is God. I am in God, and God is in me. We are one perfect unity. You know, I don't understand these things all the way, but the only thing I can do as a researcher is show you the quotes, and this is one of them, and there are many more of those. Carolyn Vengrove says, for instance, God is in everything and unites us all. And Yvonne Sneeden, you might know her too. She merged with Jesus, she said in her NDE. She says, he took my heart, or my being, my identity, the energy that is me, and he merged with it, blended it with his heart. And for a moment, we were one. I exploded into the light itself. I could feel all his feelings of love. It was mind-blowing. And then the last example that I would like to give you with respect to unity is there is this man, and he has a friend. The friend dies, and then a few days later, this man experiences that this friend dies. He is in distress. He is very, very sad. He drinks, he uses pills, and dies himself. Then in his near-death experience, so that's the near-death experiencer, he sees his friend who died before him. And this person, this friend, starts talking to him. And he knows that the NDE is interested in time. How does time work? And then he says to this NDE, I'll show you how time works. It's fluid. You can go any time you want to go to. And then he takes him to the time of Michelangelo. And why does he do that? Because he knows that the NDE is also interested in Michelangelo, in the Renaissance artist, some 600 years ago. And he takes the NDE to the Sistine Chapel, where Michelangelo had been drawing the ceiling. Maybe you've seen it when you went to Rome. It's really beautiful. And then he shows him this where Michelangelo is working on a scaffolding just below the ceiling. And this NDE is blown away. He says, it's incredible that I can just be here and see this Michelangelo working on the ceiling. And then it continues even further. There is this instance where the NDE blends with Michelangelo and is Michelangelo for a few seconds. And he said that was mind-boggling. It was incredible. And it shows you, just like with life reviews, that you can feel what another felt. Apparently not only the people that you interact with, so the people in your life that you interacted with, so the receivers of your actions, but apparently you can also blend or feel what other people have felt in history, or maybe even in future, because there is no such thing as time. And then I said there was the last quote, but there's one more that I would like to bring forward, is that goes even further than that. And this person said, when I exited my body, it was such a relief because there is no limitations. There's a big freedom. There's no anxiety. There's no pain. There's no emotions. And then she continues to say that it was not only the consciousness that was there, because I felt that the consciousness would also sort of disappear. And this is what she says. I went to the place where I no longer exist as a separate entity. It's like a drop in the ocean. You are totally dissolved in whatever, you're totally dissolved. There is no separate consciousness. There is a vastness, and you are dissolved in whatever words we use for the Godhead. So it shows you that perhaps our consciousness is also something that we will leave behind, and we will become the perfection, the light itself. That's an idea that I start to have, because there are so many quotes of NDEs that talk about this oneness. There's a chapter about why are we on Earth, and I'm running over time, so
No, you're good. You're good. Carry on.
I'm good.
Yes, you're good. Carry
Yeah.
on. Yes.
Okay, I'll carry on.
Love to hear
Okay.
the one about that.
Okay. Yeah. Why are we on Earth? You know, if you hear a lot of NDEs, sometimes they explicitly ask for why are we on Earth, and they sometimes get an answer, and sometimes an NDE doesn't ask for it, but gets to hear it anyway. It's like a bonus. You get this extra information there. I'll just give you a few of those answers that I came across. One said, it's just a game. Another one said, we are perfect as we are. We just need to express our divinity. And another one said, we are here to practice love. And another one said, raise the energy. Let me give you two explicit NDEs or quotes. One said, our purpose here is to discover unconditional love within ourselves and then offer it to others. And Lee Thornton Riggs says, I came to believe that the divinity of this light lies in and around every individual. And it is our life's purpose to find and express that divinity, which exists not somewhere far away in some distant world, but right here within each of us. So this divinity exists within each one of us. That's what she actually says. And then this, I like this story of Christina. Not every NDE has an NDE as a consequence of, a medical situation or whatever. Some people have their NDE as a consequence of something horrible. And in this case, Christina, she was 8 years old. She was abducted by two men who subsequently tried to kill her by drowning her. And that's an awful story, but I spoke to her. She's a really wonderful person. She survived, fortunately. And you have to see that she was held underwater by one of those guys. And she said, I could look through the water and see the guy's face. At the same time, I was hovering above the scene. So remember this story about that I told you before with the SUV, where the person had 2 points of view. You see that here as well. And she said, I saw from above, I saw my father running towards the scene because he had heard me scream. So that's why she was rescued. And then she said, but I had my NDE, and in my NDE, I went through a tunnel, and then at the end of the tunnel, there was someone who blocked the way, and I couldn't go out on the other side of the tunnel. And she said, but this person was very, very nice, and it must have been God. Remember, we're talking to an 8-year-old child who sees God, and she said, God told me that I have to go back, but that life is very easy because you can see it as a kind of recipe. That he gave me a recipe for life, and the recipe contained only 4 ingredients. And these ingredients are love, be loved, just be, and experience life. So love, be loved, just be, and experience life. Now, that's nice, isn't it? It's easy in the sense that love and be loved requires you to do something. And the other two, just be and experience life. You can do that also when you sit on a chair. You don't have to do anything for this. The 11th chapter is the way back. And I'll just say a few things about this. Normally it is very easy. If you hear people talk about their NDE, they have a very long story about how they get out of their body. But going back into the body is something that goes so quick, they don't know anything about that. Yet there are some people that have felt a lot of things there. And one said, well, many of them say this. They say that the body feels cold and dirty and far too small. Elizabeth Krohn, for instance, said, my expense was so big, I was wondering how they can get me back in there. And they told her they would have to squeeze her, they would have to hug her and squeeze her to go back into her body. I just quote what people say. And Ellen Dye, I love her quote. She says, it's like they have to put an elephant into a Coca-Cola can. It's too big, but they managed to do that. I don't know how. And then Tinke, that's a woman that I know from Amsterdam. Her story is also amazing. But she said, when I went back to my body, I became heavier and heavier. So At first, she was very light, as very easy everything was, but now it became heavier and heavier. And she said, and there was more structure, there's ever more structure and no freedom. And then she said, I had to go back into my body, and that's an ultimate solid structure. It's so structured that you can't escape there. Some people do say that it's a prison. They are in a prison. And then this story about Kimberly Clark Sharp. I don't know, maybe you know her. She is also in IONS working for us. She said, I'm very bad at parallel parking. She said that. And then she said, when I had to go back into my body, I was sort of parallel parking as well, and that didn't go well. Just like in real life, I'm always 3 feet away from the curb, and now I was sort of next to my body. I wasn't in my body. I had just missed it by 3 feet. And then she said, the way she came back into her body was because there was a firefighter, I think you call him. It was someone who helped her. She was lying on the ground. People around her, no one did anything. And then this firefighter saw that. He moved everyone aside, went into the center, saw her lying there, and then it gave the kiss of life. So he pressed his lips on her lips. And she said, the moment he did that, made me aware of his whole life. I saw what he was thinking. I saw that he was hesitant of putting his lips to this perfectly unknown woman to him. And yet he did that. And because he touched her, she could move back into her body again. So that helped her. It's just a wonderful story that I just wanted to tell you. And then there are after effects. That's the last chapter. But the after effects is, having an NDE is not easy. People say they on average they need 7 years to adapt to life. It's not easy. It's nice to have had an NDE because it gives an outlook that's so beautiful. But adapting to life again is very difficult. People get depressed, like Christina, the little girl of 8. She still thinks of that experience every day, and other people get depressed. But the thing that sticks out is that a lot of people, almost 100% of the NDEers, have no fear anymore of death. They value nature and other people more. They have a lower tolerance for light and sound and medicine, a higher tolerance for people and what they do. We should have that in our current society, I think. Feel emotions of others, be more psychic or mediumistic. They can communicate with dead people. Less religious, more spiritual, and interfering with electricity. That's something that's strange. People's watches, when they're electric, they stop. One person was asked by his children to run under street lights in the street, because every time he would pass a light, the light would stop and then turn on when he was gone there. Self-healing, and many more. There are so many strange and interesting and nice after effects of NDEs. And that brings me to the end of my speech. And the conclusion that I have, I'd like to bring that forward. And that is, again, that's in my book, Impressions of Near-Death Experiences. What I think is important is that the general public should understand that these experiences are real. And veridical observations give a good circumstantial evidence that NDEs are real. So there are no fairy tales that are not real. They are really real. And if people understand that they are real, then they will hopefully look at the main messages. And the main message is that love is so important and that we are all one. That it seems that we are one and that love binds us all. Also, the person and everyone, I always tell people just think of the person that you don't like at all. Also, you are connected to that person. We are all connected to anyone, to everyone in history, in the future, on the other side and on this side. And I hope that if people realize that they will be more tolerant to each other, be more nice to others, because you know that you will feel what the other goes through as if you are that other person. That is something that I really hope that people will understand, because then you will not have these conflicts in Russia, Ukraine, the Gaza with Israel, Sudan, any other conflict that there is, because people will realize that you will experience the other side as well.
Mm.
So that is more or less what I wanted to bring forward.
Lovely. That was absolutely splendid. Thank you so much. So I just want to say a couple of things. Well, first, before we get started, I do want to encourage everybody to please ask questions. We still have quite a bit of time left, so this is your opportunity to ask questions directly of our speaker today. But I also want to just point out a couple of things. We actually have interviewed Ellen Dye. I've this group now for nearly 6 years, and she has been our speaker in the past, and she's a lovely lady. We've also interviewed Nancy Rhines, another wonderful lady. I interviewed her pretty early on in the history of the chapter. We actually do have Kim Clark Sharp. She was supposed to speak in December, but we had to cancel. So she's definitely going to be speaking in the future. But we also have interviewed a countryman of yours, Dr. Pim van Lommel.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sure you know his work. So
yeah, he is the guy. He is the man who, together with 3 others, conducted this research that I spoke about. You know, the research with the hospitals, where you ask the people that were brought in with a cardiac arrest, what were your memories when you were out? In that research, he did that, and that was published in Lancet. That's really, if you are in the Lancet, then you must have made it. Medically seen then.
Medically. Oh yeah.
Yes.
British Medical Journal. I'm very familiar with it. Yes. Yeah. So I'd like to so we have we're in good company here with a lot of the people that you mentioned. I'm intrigued by some of the cases that you brought forward as well. But I also wanted to ask you first and foremost, what got you personally interested in this journey? Because you've written 2 to 3 books now that all touch upon the near-death experience. The last one that you have featured behind you is obviously quotes that have made a difference. But what got you on this journey yourself? What got you started?
That's a good question. When I was doing my study of economics, I had always been interested in spiritual things, but I couldn't never find anything that really got my attention that much as NDEs. And that came because I read the book by Raymond Moody, Life After Life. And, I was brought up Roman Catholic with hell and purgatory. And I never liked that, because something in me said, that's not correct. It's not the way it is. And then I read his book, and in the book was a story of someone who had a life review. And in the life review, she noticed that no one judged her. And when I read that really, it was like I was hit by a lightning bolt. It was like, this is true. And that's how I felt it. But I was doing my study, so I was still had to do my career. Of course, I need to earn money to have some food, and so I went on doing that. And then, like 25 years ago, I wanted to see again what was the phase in the research done. And then I saw this research by Pim van Lommel, the person that you just mentioned. And there was a lot of other research. And by the way, this research done by Pim van Lommel and his group is prospective. So it's a difficult term that shows you that you can repeat it somewhere else. And it was repeated, the
Yeah.
same research in the US
Yes.
and in Britain
Yes.
with the same outcome.
Right. The idea of validity and reliability in research, reliability being able to find the same results in different settings over and over again.
Yes.
Validity being, are we really measuring what we're purporting to measure? Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And the outcome was that a lack of oxygen or substances that are created possibly during the phase of dying are not the cause for an NDE. So it must be something else. And what that is, we don't know. But then if you look at the veridical observations, you must say, wow, there's something going on there. It's circumstantial evidence that you can actually, your consciousness can get outside of your body and be independent of it. And if you look at the second category of veridical observations that I define, second category,
Yeah.
is that you find all this, well, you get information from the heavenly environment, and that information proves to be correct. So how come that
There's
that
there's
happens?
almost no other explanation, right? There's
Yes.
almost no other explanation. It defies any kind
Yeah,
of
and
logic.
there's so much research done on that. I just flash another book
Yeah.
at you.
Yes, please.
This
The
is
self
another,
does not die.
yes, the self
Who's
does
the
not die.
author? Who's the author? If you could put it up a little
Um,
bit.
it's
Let's see, we've
Titus
got
Rivas and Annie Durver.
Titus Rivas and
Yes,
Annie Dervin and
yes,
Rudolf Schmidt or Smith.
yes.
Yes.
They are Dutch people. It
Uh-huh.
is published by IANS as well. It's an IANS publication, just like my book. And yeah, it gives you hundreds of examples of vertical observations. So I just wanted to say that there's a lot of evidence, and it's some kind of circumstantial evidence that these experiences are real. And
What I love
that's,
about your approach is how you differentiate the veridical observations, the evidence, as it were, and you basically categorize them and you put them into two groups. I
yeah,
haven't seen anybody do that before. I love that. The first one being, of course, the gentleman whose false teeth were removed when he was unconscious by the nurse, and then he needed them back. Nobody knew where they were. He recognized the nurse. The nurse was then able to, how can he possibly have known something like that? So that defies logic. There's no other explanation other than an out of body experience, most likely. But the second type is the one that I think is the most fascinating, and that is the idea that they come back with knowledge that's been imparted to them, and then it comes true potentially. And so, you must be very familiar with Dr. Mary Neal
yes,
and her
yeah,
experience when she was
yes,
underwater in a canoe accident in South America for 25 minutes, had an incredible near-death experience,
yes,
was reunited with past loved ones. But her story, what's I think very interesting about her story is that she was led to believe that her eldest son was
oh
going to
yeah,
die. I mean, that at the age of 18. And she held that. He wasn't 18, he was much younger at the time. But
yes,
she sort of hung on to that in the hope that somehow it would be untrue, unreal. I
yeah,
think he just made it to his 18th birthday. And then I think he was killed in an car accident or
yes,
something,
yeah,
run over by a car or something. I mean, you have to wonder what is the thinking behind that? I mean, obviously it's something that came true, but what a painful memory to hold for so long, what a fear to have as a parent. You have to wonder, what was the purpose of that? If we can try to understand.
Yeah.
But anyway, just going back to your point, the fact that you've got the sort of predicting the future, couldn't possibly have known types of experiences, and then experiencing something themselves while they're out of body, and then other people being able to confirm it. So I love
Yes.
that you did that.
Yeah, yeah, because the second category is just that I define them as such. That the second category gives you the impression that there is something more than just our physical world. The first category are like the denture kind of things, very important, but they give you only insight in our present world that we see, the physical world. But there is an other world that that NDEs talk about, and how do you prove that? And this is a possibility where you have these stories that are confirmed later on independently by people, and that they got information, like what you said, Mary Neal's story. She heard, or she knew that she got the information in the other world that her son would not survive 18 years. And later it proved to be true, which is incredibly painful for her. But it's also this category two veridical observation, as I would see it.
Right. And you brought up the case of Dr. Raymond Moody with the lady who had never heard of him. He wasn't necessarily well known at the time, but there was something about that place and time the way she was told to remember that name, and how extraordinary, what a coincidence, you know, the odds, what are the odds that his family moves in 18 months later to the same part of the world, and then after that, you know, they knock on the door for trick-or-treating, and there she is. It's almost as though the other side, I mean, one thing is for us to be aware of certain things when we're out of body, which is your first category. But another is when the other side really kind of steps in, and in sending messages way into the future for the person to be on the lookout. That suggests that there's an infinite intelligence, wisdom, presumably love, because it's of some benefit and some utility for the person to, you know, earmark the idea that the name Raymond Moody. There was some coming together, there was some reconciliation, there was some knowledge that was to be delivered to help the lady maybe make the next step in her spiritual journey. So that to me suggests an infinite intelligence that really has our best, hopefully has our best interests at mind. I mean, the Mary Neal story is a little bit unusual, I think. But certainly they all seem to be very beneficial messages that are being projected out into the future to kind of nudge the person maybe onto the spiritual path. So that to me just kind of opens it up in a fathomless way, in a fantastical way, because then where do you go from there? You know, what else can it do? What else does it want for us? So I love that you've made those two categories, because now it just, in my imagination, it kind of opens up this whole other world of what is the other side trying to do longer term as far as its message is concerned.
Yes. Yeah, I can give you another example of my own. I'm economist, and I was having an interview with a lady in the Netherlands, and that was in March of 2008. And it's important to remember that that was just before the financial crisis, which started in September. And in her interview, she said, well, she explained her whole near-death experience, but then she said, I was told that there would be a financial crisis, and this is the moment. And I said, well, it's all right now in economics, because we had the Bear Stearns almost failure, and the Federal Reserve in the United States brokered a deal with Chase and another bank, JP Morgan, I think, and to rescue Bear Stearns. So nothing was wrong, and the stock markets went sky high again. And I told her, "Oh, your information must be wrong, because there's nothing that points now to a downturn." And then I went away, and I thought, well, strange, but I made my notes, and And then in September, when it really started with the failure of Lehman Brothers, and then AIG and Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, all those big things that went belly up. I mean, and that started this financial crisis. And she said to me during her interview, she said, I got this information from my near-death experience, which was 22 years before that. And she said, I was shown that this was going to happen, and it's now. I said, why do you think it's now? She said, well, when I got this information 22 years ago, I didn't understand a bit of it because there was no timestamp. No one said it was September 2008 or so. It was a feeling. There was a feeling, a tension in the world that I felt during my NDE. And that same feeling is now in the world. I feel that when I read the newspapers, when I read the news, when I see the news on television, this is the moment. Believe me, this is the moment. This is going to happen. And I said, no, you're wrong. And then it happened. I mean, this is the same thing. She had this information 20 years before. She didn't know when it was going to happen, but when things moved and started, she said, this is the moment.
Yeah. I want to go back to something you said earlier as far as your journey is concerned. And it sounds as though you were brought up as in the Christian faith, and that the idea of judgment and purgatory, hell, was something that sort of as a young person probably weighed heavily on your heart. So did the door open when you read or found out that there was no judgment as a way of sort of perhaps gaining some kind of freedom, a sense of that we're not sinners and it's all doom and gloom, and where that there is some hope potentially, an alternative viewpoint that's a little lighter and more full of hope, rather than just the mainstream religious view that hell and brimstone kinds of lectures and we're all sinners.
Well, I think it was a little bit different. It was not that I felt it was heavy on my heart believing in hell and purgatory, because as a child, you go play outside and you have fun and you do stuff and whatever. But it was more that when they spoke about that, I just thought, this is wrong. It cannot be like that. But you don't think about that. And then, of course, when you're a teenager, you think about it. And then when I was in my study period, I read the book. Then it was like as if a coin went into a slot and started things, because it was like, this is correct. It was like, it was so obvious to me that what I was reading in that book with all the NDEs, that is really what is closer to reality than what the Catholic Church tells you with hell and purgatory. Yeah. And Jesus judging people, you go to the left, you go to the right, and you go to purgatory, things like that. So it felt like coming home, so to speak. Yeah.
Do you mind sharing what we spoke about just before we came on air, as it were? The idea that you may have had a near-death experience as a child, although you
Yes.
don't have a particular memory of it.
I was at a conference of IONS, and that was in Denver, and or was it Durham? I can't remember. Well, anyway, it doesn't matter. And I had a presentation about the book on the financial crisis with this example of the NDE. And later, when I was finished, a woman came up to me, someone who had had an NDE, and she said, "You have had an NDE as a child, haven't you?" And I said, "Well, I can't really remember. Uh, so I don't think so." And she said, "No, you have had one, because I can see that from your aura. People who had an NDE as a child have a specific aura, and I can see auras, and you are one of those." And then I thought back to when I was a child, and there was an incident that I was, as a child, you always try all kinds of stuff. And then I was roaming through the cupboards of my mother's, how do you say that, the spices, and I found cinnamon, and it smelled so nice. So I put some cinnamon on my hand, or a lot of it, and I just put it in my mouth, but it went into my lungs. And I can remember distinctly that I was struggling for air. And I think I even have passed out, but I can't remember that. I was so glad to be back again. It's the only thing that I remember, that I was glad to be back again. It was a kind of relief. But
But you
that could have
also
been the moment.
But you also mentioned that you're really quite intuitive, and because a lot of experiences do come back with the ability to sort of tune into that sort of universal consciousness. Can you give us some examples of that? And also, could you talk a little bit about the mediumship work that you do?
Yeah. Well, as an example, I was in school, in primary school, and there was a contest for drawings. And I knew my drawing would be picked as number one. And that actually happened. It was, you know, the feeling is not just, oh, I'm going to be number one. No, it's like it's right in your face. It's like, of course you're going to be number one, not because you're so good, but you are going to be number one. And then there was an auction of a painting of my father in the family to raise some money for my uncle in Australia to come to visit us in the Netherlands. And I wasn't able to join the gathering of the family, but I knew I was going to win. We all had to buy lotteries or lottos. I don't know how to say that. Anyway, we had to buy something, and that would fund for the trip. And I knew I was going to win, and I didn't particularly like the painting of my father. So I said to him, you know, if if I win, you can do the lottery all over again and then raise more money.
Oh,
And my
interesting.
father just didn't listen to me, and I won the picture.
Wow.
And
And so,
another time, like I went to the store one morning, and I thought something is happening in the Middle East. There is a big thing going on now, and I didn't have the news yet, and I went to the store, and I really felt. Then I thought, like, is there going to be an atomic bomb or so in the Middle East? And then in myself, there was this voice saying, no, it's not that bad, but it's not really good. And then I saw the newspapers that Iraq had invaded Kuwait. So things like that. There are a lot of these kind of examples where I know what is going to happen. And you asked me about my the course in mediumship.
yes,
And the woman that I spoke about, she has a school, and it's a very big school. It's very well known here in the Netherlands,
yes,
and she gives a course. She's an outstanding medium. What she does is, she is in a room, and there's a room full of people. She would start talking about a person that she sees and give descriptions, what he or she did, and then she would look over the whole bunch of people, and then she says, "Do you?" And then she points at someone, and she says, "Do you recognize this?" And oftentimes it's right, and if it's not right, then it's the person next or just behind. And that is something that she says everyone is able to do it. So everyone has this ability, but we have to train it. And she says some people are very good at it by nature. So if they don't train it, they are still good. And some people are not very good at it. And if they train a lot, they will get better. It's just, she says, it's just like going to the gym. Some people have the constituency to get big muscles by doing nothing or just doing a little bit.
yeah.
But some people need to work out really a lot, and then they
Right.
will get some muscles. But everyone is able to get more muscle. And that's also what she says about mediumship. Everyone has this ability. Some people will be able to attain that with a little effort, and some people have to put a lot of effort in it to get it.
I came across something just recently that made me see intuition or telepathy, whatever you want to call it, that sort of sixth sense, a little differently. And it's the idea that as your own consciousness raises, as you become a little bit more enlightened, a little bit more spiritual, you kind of sort of go up a couple of notches and you're a little bit closer to tapping into that universal consciousness. So it's because your antenna is a little bit sharper, you're being able to focus. It's not that you necessarily have a specific gift.
Yes.
Everybody can do it. It's your own evolution, it's spiritual evolution that makes you a little bit more attuned. So when I came across that, I thought that's actually very interesting because it makes sense as people who have had near experiences have really touched the other side to a certain extent. So it would make sense that they would have their antenna that little bit higher to be able to capture those radio waves compared to
Yes.
people who haven't. So that's interesting. I want to take you back to.
So what I say about NDEers, they have the door has been opened to them, and but they had to go back again. But the door doesn't close all the way,
Yeah.
so they can peek through a crack, and they are better, than other people in tuning into this other world to be medium or to be psychic or whatever. Yeah.
Right, right. I want to take you back to what you were mentioning before about the Lancet, the
Yeah.
medical journal, and those papers. Were the Lancet papers that you referred to two different separate papers or just one? And do you know the name of the paper by any chance? The name of
Yes.
the study
Yeah. It's in my book.
in your book? Okay.
Yeah, let me try to find it. It's under Pim van Lommel, of course. Oh, yeah, you write it differently. You write it. It's oh yeah, here. It is in the Lancet of 2001, and the title is "Near Death Experience in Survival of Cardiac Arrest." And then semicolon, and then it says a prospective study in the Netherlands. And it's the Lancet of number 358 in 2001.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. And then I want to go back to what you were talking about with regard to the animals and feeling what animals go through. The goat stuck in
Yes.
the fence, in particular. Do you feel the pain that you've caused other animals by eating them?
Oh,
So the fact that we're carnivores.
yes. Yeah, I understand what you say.
Oh,
I
okay.
haven't come across an NDEer who said something like that. I
Right.
have a few cases where the live animals experience something like, or in other cases with guinea pig that was launched upon a sofa because of a scared reaction of the little girl. And in her NDE, she sees exactly what, or she feels exactly what the guinea pig went through. Just like the goat, the feeling of the goat of being able to escape and being happy about that. It's
Yeah.
interesting that that happens.
So I
So
have a
be
follow-up
good to
question.
animals as well. That's what we
Yeah.
need.
So I have a follow-up question from the same participant here who says, aside from feeling the feelings of the goat, did the individual also feel the pain of the guy that he hit? You said a guy saw a
Yeah,
father
yeah,
with a
yeah.
goat. He was whipping the goat. He tuned into the goat, but did he tune into what he made the guy feel when he beat him up?
That's good. No, it doesn't say in the book of a good question. Yeah, in the book of Daniel Brinkley and Paul Perry, it does. I can't remember that they say something about it. It's more. Maybe it happened, but he wrote only about the goat.
Okay. I'm going to be devil's advocate here because if everything is a living thing, including plants and
Yeah,
fruits and vegetables are plants, right? I mean, they're basically
yeah,
plant-based. So when we cultivate them, I mean, are they going to feel the pain of being ingested? I don't know, but I mean, how far do we take the idea that
I
everything is
don't.
a living being? And at the end of the day, we do have to eat. I mean, we were created in such a way that we have to be able to eat and drink and sleep and
Yes,
So in order to fulfill our life here and our purpose, we do need to be, nourished. And so at what point, but maybe severe cruelty, unnecessarily cruelty.
Yes.
Perhaps that's where a line is drawn. I don't.
I can tell you a story.
Thanksgiving.
Yeah, the
2 million turkeys were
turkey.
slaughtered last year in the United States for Thanksgiving.
I can give you also an example with a plant. This Iranian person, it's another one that I spoke about before, saw his life as a child, and he saw the moment that he was going out there for getting a bucket of water from the creek and carrying it back home. That's what his mother asked him to do. So he does that. But halfway, he notices that the bucket is too heavy for him to carry it all the way home. It's a child. So he thinks, okay, I have to spill some out of it. And then he sees this tree that was kind of thirsty. He said, I saw the tree was kind of thirsty. So I decided to spill some of the water next to the tree and then bring the rest of it back home. And then in his NDE, he sees the happiness that he created by giving some water to the tree. Isn't that amazing? I mean, there in my book, there are all the quotes. That's why I say I'm so grateful to all the NDEers that gave their quotes. And there are famous ones and non-famous ones. And my book should be like multi-thousand pages because all the NDEers have such a wonderful information and quotes, and that gives such a good view of what it really is.
Yes, yes. In your research, have you come across light workers? And what do you know about them? What do you know about this topic? And the purpose of Raise the Energy made our participant think about this when she wrote the question. So, yeah, so in your research, have you come across, do you know much about light workers? And what do you,
Yeah, the light workers being spiritual beings that help us.
I'm not sure. I think so. Or maybe even humans who have chosen to be here to try to bring enlightenment to the.
Okay, yeah, I've heard about those too. But you know, I feel that we all have, how to say that? It starts from my belief, starting to believe that we are all one. So it means that we all come from this origin, from this light, or God or source, or however you want to call it. We have that within us. We have the divinity within us. Everyone. Think of someone you really despise. Also that person. Everyone. But sometimes it's buried within us because of certain reasons. And I always try to make people think of people living in a how do you say that, in slums, where they don't have, where they see men abusing women, shooting for drugs, and they don't get a good example. Can you blame them that they become same? It's just a question that I ask you. It's like I don't know the answer, but it's like we all have the light within us, and sometimes it's buried because of the way we are constructed with our genes. So that's nature, or how we are educated or brought up, and that's nurture. That's so if we are in an unfortunate position because we didn't see any love, how can you expect someone to give love unless they reach within themselves? I hope I can.
It's an interesting concept. I would say that free will comes into play. I mean, as human beings, if we're exposed to something as children, we tend to revert to what's familiar. So we will repeat often what we've been taught. However, if you had a really bad experience as a child, if your parents just were very neglectful, you can go a couple of ways. You might repeat the kinds of same behaviors because at a subconscious level, you're not even really aware, and maybe you've basically push the pain down so far that you're numb to it. And so you're on automatic pilot and you repeat some of the same mistakes. Sometimes you might be so aware. If you, for example, a boy had a very authoritarian father who was overly punitive and he suffered greatly as a child, as an adult, he has free will at that point. He's very conscious of what happened. He might make the decision to never be the way his father was because it made him feel horrible. He wouldn't
Yeah.
want it to his children. But what happens there sometimes is people can overcorrect and they can become overly permissive and try to correct the overly authoritarian parent. But I would say there, yes, people who grow up in a ghetto or in less than optimal circumstances, they can repeat because that's what's familiar. Maybe they also, part of them has a choice to try to change, but change is not easy, right?
Yeah.
And I think you've got to be so unhappy with the status quo that you've got to hit bottom and then decide, okay, I can't live like this anymore. I am going to change my life. But people are often stuck in that, okay, well, this isn't good, but somehow it's not so bad that they desperately need to change it. So, but I do think free will comes into play. And I think that helps explain some individual differences. It's not nature, nurture. Yes, it is. It's a combination of those two. But then you've got the individual as well coming forward and making a decision. And temperament has
Yeah.
to do with it as well.
You're correct. I think you're absolutely correct that we have a free will. That's something that I understand from NDEs. And then sometimes people ask me, yeah, but how is it possible that things are seen in the future and they turn out to be like it is, like the example that I gave with the the person from Moody's experience, or the woman with the financial crisis. You
Right.
cannot. Some things seem to be predetermined, but
Yes.
there was this a woman in the Netherlands, and she said, "Well, it's like we have free will." But sometimes we are at a crossroads and we don't know whether we take a left turn or a right turn. We're struggling with it. We need to take a decision tomorrow. But on the other side, they can see already what your decision is. And they know that you're turning, for instance, right. But they can only see that because there, on the other side, there is no time, or they can look through time. So you have to give. She gives the impression that we have our free will, but on the other side, they have possibility to see what the outcome is. And she compares that to sitting in a plane. When you are walking in Amsterdam, you cannot see Haarlem, which is a city 11 miles away from here. And if you're in Haarlem walking in the streets there, you can't see Amsterdam. But if you're sitting in a plane, having a different point of view, you can see both places at the same time.
Mm. Yes, that's interesting. And of course, this isn't exactly what you're saying, but I'm drawing a parallel with so many of your examples where people are in bilocating. Once they're out of body, they seem to be able to be in a couple of places at the same time.
Yes.
They are wherever they wish to be with whomever they wish to be, as it were. They seem to be able to just go there by 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 dint of just sheer will. Um, I do want to come back because we're starting to run out of time. I do want to come back to Daniel Brinkley. I haven't had the pleasure of interviewing him for my group, but I have actually spoken to him on the phone a couple of times. We had a mutual acquaintance way back.
Oh,
I'm fascinated by what you said regarding his life review. And he's a tough guy. He's had a tough life, and
absolutely.
fascinating that he was maybe a mercenary. I don't know exactly what he did in the military, but the idea that he has killed a lot of U.S. enemies, as it were. And when he lived his life review, he got to see how not only the individual felt, but also the wives and the children, etc. But yet there was forgiveness, there was no judgment on the other side. So I'm not sure what to make of that. Somebody following through in terms of military duty. The military obviously comes very much to mind in a situation like this.
Yeah.
Milgram's experiment comes very much to mind. People,
Yeah.
because an authority tells you to do something, do you do it when it's, morally wrong, and it's morally wrong, and then hide behind the fact that you were told to do it by an authority figure? So Milgram's experiments and all that kind of stuff. So what do you think about that? I mean, does that mean that you may be asked to do something that goes against your morals, but beware, because you're going to live the consequences when you have your life review? Does that mean we really shouldn't be, following through with orders when we know that they're wrong? What does that do to the
Well, maybe the
military?
answer is yes. Maybe the plain answer is yes. The point with live reviews, I want to stress that, is that people get to see their place in the world. That's how I understand it. It's not like, oh, you did this wrong and you will see what you did as if you are the other. No, you will see what the other went through as if you are the other, but it's not as a punishment. It's like it's the only reason that I understand from many NDEs is to understand your position in the world. So if a military person follows up the orders, yes, I think this person will feel what he did. And just between brackets, and I know this is a touchy subject, but there are several wars going on in the world. I mentioned Russia, Ukraine. I mentioned Gaza, the Palestinians versus Israel, or the vice versa, and some others. I think I pity all these people that have to do these things, because they will feel what they do or what they did as if they are the other. So they become the other. And again, it's not as a punishment. It's to see what your position is in the world, to understand the world. It is no judgment. There is no punishment. That's the whole idea.
But maybe we're judging ourselves, as you said during your talk. There's the angel said, the harshest, most powerful critic is in fact the self. And so in the life review, what I've learned is that people will judge their own performance. I did okay there, but I didn't do so well here. And I think that perhaps informs their decision to possibly come back, because they didn't feel that they learned the lesson of love, or whatever lesson that they signed up for. They forgot all about that. And maybe that's part of the reason to reincarnate. I don't know. What do you think?
Reincarnation is another thing that if I don't say that I know it all, I want to stress that. And I always say, if someone knows exactly how it works on the other side, you have to run away, because no one really knows. But I also can conceive a world or a situation without reincarnation, because you are everyone. If we are from the source, if we are from God, then we have the experience of all the lives that were and are and will be in the future. Why would there be why should there be, why is reincarnation necessary? That's just an idea. I just don't say that this is the way it is, because I know that there are NDEs that believe that there is reincarnation, but there are also NDEs that don't feel like that at all. And the percentage of NDEs that feel like there is reincarnation is more or less the same as there is in the general public. So it doesn't say anything.
Okay. I want to turn to distressing NDEs, because you touched on those and the work of Nancy Evans Bush.
Yes.
And that's really interesting, because you emphatically said, a bad NDE doesn't happen. It doesn't follow that a bad person gets a bad NDE or a bad life review, right? Necessarily, a distressing NDE. It can happen to anyone. So I'm wondering, I'm thinking of Howard Storm and his story. We interviewed him. His was very hellish, and he was sort of led into a very dark place by some entities, creatures, who ended up sort of attacking him physically and emotionally. And his way out was, as a little boy, he remembered when he was in Sunday school, a little tune about Jesus. He sort of started to say that, and then the beautiful white light came, and he was kind of lifted out of that experience. But what rhyme or reason do you attach to a negative or a hellish NDE versus a pleasurable one? Do you have any sense, given all the people that you've worked with and interviewed and researched?
There is, just as I said, there are a lot of examples of people who've had an average life, nothing special. They didn't kill like Daniel Brinkley did, 50 people in a hotel by blowing up the whole hotel just to get out one. So the conclusion is still that you cannot say that a distressing NDE is there only for bad people and blissful ones is there only for the good people, however you define them, because that's difficult in itself. Why that is, I don't know. In IANS there is a sharing group on distressing NDEs, and what I understand from the people of IANS that participate in it is that there are many more of these examples where people have had a hellish NDE, just like Howard Storms. That was, he said somewhere in his book, I cannot tell everything because thinking back to those moments make me scared because it was even worse than I write in this book, something like that, he says. So, but there are more people that have the feeling that there's nothing special why they would have to have a distressing NDE. And so I want to bring that forward. So every person that has a distressing NDE, I believe that there is another reason for this, and I gave that other reason. And I want to stress again that there are people, NDEers, that as a byproduct of their NDE, they get to hear that there is no hell and purgatory, just to soothe the idea that there is a hell, or to show that there is no hell.
Yes. I wonder, given that we want to give the benefit of the doubt to source, to the other side, because they know what they're doing. I mean, they're very smart. I'm just wondering whether people get the kind of near-death experience that they need at that given moment, that there is a logic to it, perhaps. I know it might be controversial, but I'm thinking of Howard Storm, and when we interviewed him, I think he said something like, I was an atheist at the time. I was a hard nut to crack. I was very arrogant. I wasn't the nicest of people. And, I needed something that was going to grab me by this, by my collar and bring me in and really shake me to sort of get the message. If it had been something that was very gentle and, harps and, beautiful melodies, and I might not have really taken it that seriously, but when it started in the way it did, it got my attention. I desperately wanted to get out and I got the help. It sounds as though perhaps that's what he needed to sort of bring change about, if that's what he wanted to achieve, perhaps in his pre-life
It could be, but
plan.
if he would have had a real nice, wonderful NDE that you cannot just overlook, because there are many of those stories of people that have such a nice NDE, such a nice experience that they cannot just neglect that. Then he would have changed as well. So I don't know why the reason, what
Yes,
the reason is why
yes,
he would have had one. But I
yes,
think it's good that it's such a brave thing to do, to write a book about his experience. And
right.
also Kathy McDaniel, the one that I showed you, I'm going to flash the same book again. This one,
It's
it's,
upside down. It's
oh,
upside down.
oh, yeah,
Yeah, there you go. We can see it now. Thank
this
you.
one, it's so
Lift
good
it in
that she
hell.
did it, that she wrote
Heaven
this
expanse.
book. Yeah,
Right. Yeah.
it's so
Well,
important.
do you know of anyone, just very, very quickly, do you know of anyone who's had more than one near-death experience where one was hellish and then the rest were not? Maybe the
I
first one
know of
was
one
and vice
person,
versa?
yes. I
Okay.
one person who had a wonderful NDE. What was the reason again? I can't remember. But she had a wonderful NDE. And then, oh, she was in hospital, yes. And she was intubed. And then she woke up again. And she was told that she would recover all the way. And she was totally paralyzed, and she thought, that cannot be true. How can they make me back to normal again? And then she decided to just bite the tube and to commit suicide. And then she had a real hellish NDE. And I want to stress that there are stories of people who committed suicide who have had such a wonderful NDE. So you cannot draw the conclusion that if you commit
Yes.
suicide, you go to hell.
No,
But
no,
in
no.
her case,
Absolutely.
she had a hellish experience, and she was told, just trust us, and you go back. But this is what you get if you something, I don't know how it was something like that. So she had two NDEs, one a blissful one and one hellish.
Right. That's interesting. All right. So just want to very quickly say that, you were talking about the after effects and how devastating those can be for people to sort of reintegrate. I do want to just say that there is actually an association called ACIST, ACIST, the American Center for the Integration of Spiritually Transformative Experiences. I'm happy to say that I'm a board member, and what our mandate is at the moment is to put together an online curriculum for therapists, licensed therapists who are already in the business, who actually want to take on this particular specialty and then train in order to work with experiences, or anyone who's had an anomalous experience, to help them reintegrate and feel accepted and acceptable, as it were. So anyway,
Very
on that
important.
very important work, absolutely.
Absolutely.
So we have run over time, which I don't often do, but it's been an absolute pleasure, and it's just been super interesting. I hope you've enjoyed it. I know we
I
have
loved
enjoyed it
it.
tremendously. Thank you so much. Bless
Thank
you.
you so much for having me. And it was really a pleasure to be with you and to show you my work.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Keep it up, and hope to see
Thank
you
you.
again soon. Take care. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. See you next time. Bye-bye. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.